Hello and welcome back to English with Jack. My aim with this channel is to help you build confidence in your English skills so you can understand natural conversations and stories with ease. In this lesson, we are going to explore a very common and useful English idiom, barking up the wrong tree. By listening to this mystery story set in a quiet British village, you will not only improve your listening comprehension, but also learn exactly how to use this phrase to describe a situation where someone has completely misunderstood the facts. Harrison was a man of routine who lived in a charming detached house in the Cotswolds. He spent his retirement tending to his rose garden and looking after his collection of rare coins and jewellery. His favourite item was a heavy gold pocket watch that he had inherited from his father. He kept it on a small table in his conservatory, polishing it every Sunday morning. One pleasant afternoon, Harrison decided to invite a few neighbours round for tea and cake. Among the guests was a woman named Fiona. She had recently moved into the flat down the road and was known for being rather loud and inquisitive. During the party, Harrison noticed that Fiona seemed fascinated by the gold watch. She picked it up without asking, commenting on how heavy and expensive it looked, before Harrison nervously took it back and placed it safely on the mantelpiece. The afternoon passed pleasantly enough, but once the guests had departed, the atmosphere in the house changed. Harrison went to the conservatory to check on his plants and froze. The mantelpiece was empty. The gold watch was gone. He searched the floor, looked behind the sofa and checked the pockets of his cardigan, but it was nowhere to be found. A cold feeling of anger washed over him. He thought back to the party and remembered Fiona's covetous stare. She was the only stranger in the group, and she was the only one who had touched it. Harrison became convinced that Fiona had slipped the watch into her handbag before leaving. He paced around his living room, muttering to himself that he would not let her get away with this. He was absolutely certain she was the culprit, but as he grabbed his coat to march down to her flat, he had no idea that he was making a terrible assumption. Harrison buttoned his trench coat against the evening chill and marched down the pavement towards the village centre. His mind was racing with accusations. He had known Fiona was trouble from the moment she moved in, he told himself. She was too loud, too flashy, and clearly had sticky fingers. When he arrived at the converted Victorian house where Fiona rented a ground-floor flat, he hesitated for only a moment before banging loudly on the front door. He could see lights on inside and a shadow moving behind the curtains. He prepared himself for a confrontation, rehearsing exactly what he was going to say to catch her out. The door opened and Fiona stood there holding a mug of tea, wearing a confused expression. She barely had time to say hello before Harrison launched into his accusation. He demanded she return the heirloom immediately and save them both the embarrassment of involving the authorities. Fiona stared at him, her mouth slightly open in shock. She set her mug down on a side table and told him quite firmly that she had no idea what he was talking about. She admitted she had admired the watch, yes, but she certainly hadn't taken it.
Harrison scoffed at her denial. He pointed a trembling finger at her and told her that he had seen the greedy look in her eyes. Fiona's shock quickly turned to indignation. She crossed her arms and told Harrison he was being ridiculous. She offered to let him search her handbag right there on the doorstep, but Harrison refused, convinced she had already hidden the stolen goods somewhere inside the flat. He told him that she left him no choice but to contact the police. Fiona, now red in the face with anger, told him to go ahead and do whatever he liked, but warned him that he was making a massive fool of himself. She slammed the door in his face, leaving Harrison standing alone on the doorstep. He felt a surge of adrenaline. He was not going to back down. Pulling his mobile phone from his pocket, he dialed the non-emergency number for the local police station, fully convinced that justice was on his side.
Harrison paced the floor of his kitchen, waiting for the police officer to arrive. He felt righteous in his anger, but a small knot of anxiety had formed in his stomach. To distract himself, he decided to tidy up the remnants of the party properly. He grabbed the tablecloth that he had hastily bundled up earlier in the evening and carried it to the laundry basket. As he shook the cloth out, something heavy and metallic flew out from the folds and landed on the tiled floor with a loud clatter. Harrison froze. He looked down and saw the gold pocket watch spinning slowly on the tiles, completely unharmed. A wave of absolute horror washed over him. The memory suddenly returned. Just before the guests left, he had swept some crumbs off the table and into his gardening trug to keep the patio clean. And he must have accidentally knocked the watch in with them. He hadn't seen it because it was buried under a napkin. Fiona hadn't touched it. She hadn't stolen anything. Harrison stared at the watch, his face burning with shame. He had marched down to a new neighbor's house, accused her of being a thief, and even called the police, all while the watch was sitting safely in his own kitchen. He had been so convinced of his own detective skills that he had ignored the most obvious explanation. He immediately cancelled the call to the police, his hands shaking as he hung up the phone. He knew he had a difficult walk ahead of him. He returned to Fiona's flat, moving much slower this time. When Fiona opened the door, she looked ready for another argument, but her expression softened when she saw Harrison's pale, embarrassed face. He held up the watch and offered a profound apology. He admitted that he had found it in his own laundry pile. Fiona sighed, shaking her head, and told him that he was lucky she was a forgiving person. She looked him in the eye and said that he had quite literally been barking up the wrong tree. Harrison could only nod in agreement, having learned a very painful lesson about making assumptions. That brings us to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed following Harrison's investigation and his eventual realization. Notice how the situation with Harrison and Fiona perfectly illustrated the idiom barking up the wrong tree. Harrison was aggressively pursuing the wrong target and blaming the wrong person, just like a hunting dog barking at a tree where the cat isn't hiding. It is a fantastic phrase to use when someone is following a false lead or accusing the wrong person.
If you found this story helpful for your English listening skills, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more practice. See you in the next lesson.